Welcome to a new edition of Learning SEO, the Learning SEO Accelerator. In today's edition, we are going to focus on SEO auditing. SEO audits, how do we audit websites from an SEO standpoint to establish our SEO recommendations, right? I believe that this is one of the key activities and core, let's say, tasks that we need to do in SEO, whatever role we have, right? Even if we are content-focused specialists, we need to do content audits. If we are link builders, we need to do link-focused audits. We are technical SEOs, technical-focused audits. If we are SEO strategists and do a little bit of everything SEO, we should then do audits that are more, let's say, integral and take everything into account, right? And as usual, to start our today's conversation, what I will do is tackle the initial concepts to lay out, let's say, the foundation. And from there, take it with Chris Green, who's our today's guest. He's a very knowledgeable SEO, quite experienced when doing SEO audits, developing SEO audits in different type of scenarios, very challenging and also tricky scenarios. And he's here to answer those questions that require a little bit of more context and insights to clarify your doubts, right? Hello and welcome, Chris. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It'll be good.
Amazing. So let's start right away tackling, let's say, the foundations of what is an SEO audit and why should we do an SEO audit. So our SEO process in general should be focused on achieving certain type of goals, results. In fact, our next edition will be how do we set those goals. These goals have to do with the revenue, the ROI, whatever is a metric of success for the business or the website that we're working on. If we're working on a website that makes money selling advertisement, or that do affiliates, well, like increasing the page views of the ads or increasing the clicks on the affiliates will be goals to achieve. In the case that we're selling a product or services, selling more of them, increasing the revenue, increasing the ROI will be then a goal, very likely, for those websites. So when we have those goals for our SEO process, we need to say, okay, how do we achieve these goals? We'll be growing the traffic of existing and rankings of existing pages, or should we create more pages? Should we fix technical configurations or misconfigurations that are challenging our current traffic rankings conversions? Or should we optimize the content of the existing pages, or should we create more content to target more queries? How do we start? And those will be the questions that will be addressed and pretty much answers and tackled by doing an SEO audit, which is pretty much a research and an analysis of our website versus the context that we have and the goals that we have. And based on that, we will establish an action plan, right? So just to show you a little bit, because there are a few questions regarding this, I will be sharing very, very, very quickly my screen here to show you a little bit of the steps in general, right? Of course, there, as usual, there will be a few, it depends here, but in general, the type of steps and criteria and rationale to take into account. And let's remember a little bit here what we talk about when tackling link building with BB Raven last week, that you will see that a lot of stuff here, as usual, at the end of the day, is common sense and tackling what actually matters to achieve the goals that we actually need for that particular business, right? So let's start by saying that the bigger the website, the most difficult it will be that this website is perfectly optimized. And in fact, I will say that our goal when we do an SEO audit and we establish SEO recommendations is not to have a perfectly optimized website. Why? Because what we want is to achieve a positive ROI, a return on investment on our client. And how are we going to achieve that goal? we are going to achieve that goal by fixing and improving and optimizing to achieve the goals based on what actually matters for that goal achievement. So there will be always issues on pages that don't matter for that goal, or minor issues that are not affecting ultimately the revenue of the website or the goals that we want to achieve of the scope of the website. So even in an ideal world where everything works well and we are optimizing for the sake of optimizing, we might take those into account, but no, we want to optimize what actually matters to achieve the goal that we set in that SEO process, right? So there is this little flowchart. Remember that I have this post, you have all of these flowcharts here that I have shared in a couple of editions before. And this is the mindset to use in this particular context, especially. Should you prioritize an SEO issue or opportunity execution? Is the SEO issue opportunity affecting the rankings of your targeted queries or goals on pages that actually matter to achieve those goals? Yes or no? If not, don't do it. You will see that many SEO tools, SEO crawlers of any type, Screaming Frog, Cyborg, whatever, OnCrawl, like whatever crawler that you use, they tend to have this metrics that are aimed to help us to drive our SEO auditing. When collecting the data, they flag it based on certain metrics and to help us when assessing the actual data later, right? And there might say, oh, there are high risk issues or something like that in certain pages. And when you go and take a look, it's because these pages are being blocked by the robots.txt or being no index with a meta robots no index, no follow, or meta robot no index follow. But when you go and take a look at these pages, you see that these are pages that are internal search result pages that are not even meant to be indexed because of content duplication issues. So these are not actual problems. You actually want these pages to be no index in the first place or blocked in the first place because you don't want to achieve any goals with them. They are not meant to be ranked, right? So as you can see, if you allow these tools to drive the whole prioritization of your SEO auditing or to drive the SEO auditing process and recommendations, and you leave that on autopilot, even if these goals, if these tools meant well, that is just like the path for failure, right? You should drive and you should know when what those tools flag actually matter, and you should take action based on your understanding of the goals of the website and what you want these pages to behave to connect with those goals, right? The next question, is the execution effort cost going to be compensated by the impact of it? Because again, you only have so much time and so many resources to use. So even if you know, an example, that a facet page should be indexable, the metadata should be optimized, should feature better content, more quality content, FAQs, etc. But when you do the math, you see that the queries that this page are targeting are minimal, and the type of traffic and the search volume that they have is minimal. Should you prioritize it? Well, if this is the only thing that you have to do left, maybe. But if there are many other activities that have a higher impact, you might not necessarily, you shouldn't necessarily be prioritizing that particular effort, right? Because the effort in itself might be higher than what you will be able to achieve if you optimize that page and if you rank with that page and the traffic that that page will attract. So everything should be put in context of your goals and what you want to achieve, because at the end of the day, you're not an SEO for the sake of optimizing websites again to be perfectly optimized. You're optimizing because you want to bring revenue and you want to achieve certain goals again. And final question, is the execution impact higher, more important than the ones of current content activities? And this happens many times when we see a new release of Google. We see a new update of Google. Many times, should we continue doing the current recommendations that we have set from the audit that we did a month ago, or should we change the whole priority? Analyze first, identify, assess first if what the drop that you see that your website is having right now actually matters, because it is affecting pages that are under the scope or of your current SEO roadmap and connected to goals that you actually have. And if the impact of this drop is actually higher of whatever you're doing right now to improve or fix what is already in the roadmap and in the backlog. Oh, yes, it's very important. It's actually affecting or dropping right now major category pages and should be prioritized, because the opportunities and the impact will be definitely higher than whatever I am tackling right now, and affect a lot the goals and revenue. Definitely prioritize it. Or not, is affecting pages that are not under the scope, are not from the market that I am focusing on, or the type of revenue that they will bring are much lower than the ones that I'm tackling, and I don't have as many resources. You need to prioritize, and this won't be prioritized because of that. You need to be sure enough and be under control and understand your website and the behavior of the website and what you need to achieve and what you want to achieve. And based on that, make these decisions. Good SEOs, real SEOs, make the decision every day, because this is how you achieve results. You don't achieve results following checklists. Checklists are great to avoid forgetting stuff, but it's not great to follow by heart or the priority that in general they set, because of how important are certain configurations or not, or what tools tell us to do first or not. No, you know better than them what actually affect you in your scenario. You can take them as a reference, as an input to take a look at them first, but that doesn't mean that you should prioritize them first to tackle, because that requires effort, and that effort should be compensated and should be connected with a potential revenue based on your goals. Then steps. Usually, again, it depends on the context, and many of the questions are about that. But in general, when you start a new SEO process, you want to have a proper understanding of everything. How is everything configured, and how every area is part of the puzzle of your website, because based on that is that you are going to be able to prioritize the optimizations of content rather than technical, because you see that technical, most of the major important configurations are well set. Technical configuration is not something holding back the rankings of the key pages that are important to optimize to target the important queries. So you don't, technical is not a challenge. It's not an issue. You prioritize content, you prioritize backlinks. But to be able to establish this, or the other way around, all of your pages are badly canonicalized or are generating new URLs every time you access to the website because of the way that they are configured. And that's an issue, generating in mass content duplication problems. Or there are major technical configuration issues, and this is definitely holding you back. So you should definitely prioritize this before doing anything on content or backlinks. Again, it requires you to assess everything to be able to have this understanding of what will move the needle better than other areas, right? So the first thing to do is to gather data. The website technical, search optimization data with performance, current rankings, traffic, backlinks, content performance, everything. And this you should get from SEO crawlers if you can. Not all the time is possible, I'm afraid. Web server log files, Google Search Console, Google Analytics, backlink tools. The more, the better. But of course, you cannot go paralysis by analysis. I will say a couple of crawlers to have different data sources along with the Google Search Console data might be good. Screaming Frog with Cybolf, with SE crawl or SE ranking, sorry. And then just to validate consistency, to check that you're not leaving anything important out is critical, is fundamental, right? Don't over-rely on a single data source. Google Search Console is great, but that doesn't replace an SEO crawler. With the SEO crawler, you actually simulate the Google bot and try to simulate. So the Google Search Console data, the one that the Google Search Console give from an indexing standpoint or SEO crawling standpoint, is very high level. They don't give you the granularity that you need. You can also double check the status and the performance of certain type of pages with the URL inspect option in the Google Search Console, but that is one by one page. Or if you have the API access, you can have up to 1,000 pages, right? But it's not enough for many websites. So again, having a SEO crawlers or a couple of SEO crawlers to try to simulate is important. Understand that these are simulations too, that this is not necessarily the behavior that ultimately the Google bot will see. So that is why it's important to also double check with your Google Search Console access, the URL inspect tool, etc., and validate that there's consistency. The numbers don't need to be 100% the same, but there's consistency between the behavior. So again, the more the better, but again, be reasonable here, common sense. You cannot spend 6 months just analyzing or spend €1 million on tools either. So again, what is the sweet spots here of the tools and time to spend in analysis? Well, again, common sense here and balance it out. And then based on the gathered data, you analyze issues, opportunities, potential issues, opportunities to assess if they're actually harming the page's organic search performance to achieve your website SEO and biz goals. So, oh, my privacy policy page is being blocked by the robots.txt and no index. Not ideal, but this shouldn't be a priority. This is a non-issue for you. This is a page that won't help you to achieve your SEO goals, your organic search goals, right? So again, you need to have a good understanding of the web context and goals, as well as the SEO process, in particular goals here that you want to set. And then based on what you gather and you analyze, you establish hypotheses and solutions, right? To address the identified issues for each of the affected scenarios by page type or role within the website, you should say, okay, if we improve the titles and the descriptions, we will also improve click-through rate. If we improve the relevance of the title tags, we will likely also improve the rankings along by improving the major elements of the content of the pages, the H1, the FAQs, the descriptions of the main product pages, for example, etc., etc. So you will come up with hypotheses and solutions and recommendations to improve those pages that you actually want to increase your rankings, your traffic and conversions from, and because everything with SEO are not absolute, and you can actually achieve the same goals in many ways too. You can establish, okay, ideally we should do this. This is my first alternative, but maybe your technical team, your development team will tell you, look, sorry, you're recommending to redirect these pages, to consolidate these pages, but that is not doable. That's not feasible from a technical standpoint. This is when you need to have and provide alternative. Okay, if this is not an option, what about if we canonicalize instead? What about if we no index instead? What about? So that is why I established here hypotheses and different solutions, because what it is important here is that after we audit, we need to establish recommendations to solve an issue, to achieve a goal. This should be action-driven, right? So rather than saying, oh, there are 100 404s on the website that need to be fixed, you should say, there are key pages that are showing errors, providing a bad user search experience, that are not able to rank because they are literally showing errors that we need to fix. This is how they look. This is the bad experience that we're given. These are pages that are able to achieve this in traffic and this in rankings. And if we fix them, this should be the outcome. And this is how we can fix them. This is how they should look. This is how our competitors are doing it. This is how much our competitors are achieving with them, to show proof of how much there is for you to gain if you fix them. So this is how you establish solutions and actions to do, right? Very action-driven, so they know what to do. They don't need to sort out what to do. They know what to do based on your recommendations. If that is not possible, then there's going to be a back and forth to negotiate alternatives, right? Prioritization here is key. If you have an example, 10 actions to take, 20 actions to take, I will say again, you don't want a perfectly optimized website. You want a website that those areas that actually matter are optimized to perform well and achieve your goals. So why you need 100 recommendations? Why you need a recommendations of 100 pages? You're likely done. You actually need a 20 pages maximum, establishing the top 10 priorities, because actually this is something that you will be doing every time you have goals for the next 6 months or for the next year. After you implement these recommendations and achieve those goals or not, you will have a new set of goals and actions connected to them for the next 6 months or for the next year. So this is an iterative, ongoing process, right? So you don't need to, again, analysis paralysis, develop 2 months to come up with 100 recommendations that will never be done anyway, because you don't have enough resources and time. So again, you need to establish maximum top 10 actions, and these top 10 actions should be prioritized based on the impact that they will have on your goals and the effort and cost that they will have to be executed. And that will depend on your resources, to technical, content, promotional resources, whatever resources. So the solutions focus actions based on their impact towards the SEO process goals and implementation viability and effort should be put. Again, in this activity, I expect a lot of back and forth with the team involved, with the stakeholders, based on the capacity, based on the viability. And then whenever you establish and send and share these recommendations, please make it in a format that is easy to consume and understand, to facilitate decision makers and to facilitate stakeholders to understand the importance. So they don't need to be very technical. They don't need to be SEOs to understand the why is this important. This should be so straightforward. So this should be pretty much for dummies. I mean, not because they're dummies, but because they're not SEOs, and that shouldn't be the role here. So it should be very straightforward, easy to consume. What I like to do is to do a Google Doc, and after the Google Doc, that is for the stakeholders to have screenshots and everything well documented, I will do a executive summary in Google Slides, right? So it's so very easy to consume that even decision makers can go through it very, very quickly and understand the impact and understand the importance right away and take action. Oh, let's take action. Okay, here's a better documentation, how to do it, different ways, hypotheses, and more information, and all the data in Google Sheets or whatever other repository of data you want to use. But again, you need to format it in a way that is understandable and facilitate action depending on the audience that you're talking with. Okay, so having now laid the foundations and understanding of what is an SEO audit and why an SEO audit is important and the goal to achieve, let's start a little bit more with the focus Q&A with Chris here, going through the different questions, knowing that, yeah, I won't be asking the ones that we have already clarified pretty much, what I have already explained before. Right. So like this is interesting because there are a few questions, Chris, here, asking regarding when conducting an SEO audit for a website that has an international reach, right? What will you do? Will you separate the audits for each one of the markets as something individual, or what do you prefer? Do you prefer to make or develop a single audit for all of them? What is your approach?
That's an interesting one. I mean, a lot of it's depending on the organization that I'm reporting into and where the stakeholders are. So I guess if we're talking about an international audit and you've got different areas of the business that you're reporting into on it, very often they want to feel like they've had their own audit. So whilst from the actual audit process itself, I tend to audit them all together. So the biggest technical issue that would cover a large portfolio of websites is hreflang, or those definitions of how all these pages relate together. You have to audit them together to actually gain the full kind of understanding. You also need to understand, are your pages competing accidentally with each other in other search engines? I think from just an analysis and the technical lift of that, it makes so much sense to do it together. Or if you don't do it globally at once, you maybe pick, usually the US market will leach into one of the other English-speaking markets. For example, you could potentially do the same in Europe with some French languages, or potentially Spanish. If I want a microcosm of an internationalization issue, I might pick a focused area to draw some examples and then point back to the key functionality. I would say that overall hreflang audit I would conduct for everything, because you just won't know what the issues are or what's driving them. I think when I report it back, however, I would I'd try and kind of pick the overall issue and tell the story of that issue with 1 or 2 examples. And then if I have other stakeholders from key countries or regions, I might personalize depending how insecure they feel about their budgets and how much they've paid for the audit. So there's a degree of knowing who the stakeholders are. But I think if you can show them the example and showing it wrong, I mean, this is where, I don't know if anyone uses Miro. It's like just like almost, I call it like a digital whiteboarding software. Miro's fantastic for like visualizing entire SERPs and sort of zooming in and showing people around them. So, you know, we all present in a landscape format. Search results pages are vertical. So if you want to show them some examples of search results going wrong, I get up Miro and we just scroll around them, and we can kind of do more of a workshopping kind of session in that. And that often tells the story. The thing I tend to avoid of audits, and I'm sort of going tangentially off your original question a little bit, if it's going to be absolutely huge to the point that I don't think the attention spans in the room are going to cope with the outputs, I cut it. So even if I say, look, trust me, I've looked at 1.5 million pages, I've analyzed 300 data points using this software, which is very sophisticated, but I'm going to show you the top 5 or top 10 things that you really need to worry about now. And I know some people do refuse in that, and they relish chucking a 60, 70, 100 page document at a client. And I might well do it at some point, but most never welcome that to start with. So even if I do a large scoped audit, I tend to present a very small
I love your answer.
kind of portion of it.
Shows the importance of 2 things. First, that at the end of the day, you're not doing an audit just for the sake of doing an audit and understand everything yourself and perfectly optimize everything, because that is not the goal, but because it will be communicated to different stakeholders many times to achieve certain goals. So the answer here will depend on, it's the same, for example, if there is an SEO director making the decision for all of the markets, and for all of the markets, the goals are the same, and all of the markets have the exact same content and information and web structure and targeting the same queries. It shouldn't be many times, by the way, but because there are different ways to search in different markets, even in the same language, by the way. But imagine if it is, then you don't need separate audits. It might be fulfilled with a single one. But if there's a lot of nuance, if there are a lot of different SEO stakeholders, one for each market, and you know that to satisfy their goals and demands and needs, you will need to, and because of the nature of the markets are very, very different, and there are many different type of pages published in one versus the other, they will need their proper independent analysis and prioritization and everything. So again, it depends on the need and your understanding and common sense. Again, as we mentioned with BB last week, which is the best possible answer here to prioritize and put everything into context in SEO. Another question, Chris, regarding how often would you recommend, especially now we have, by the way, Content King, which is a real-time SEO crawler, pretty much. So whenever a change happens, you get an alert and you get this incentive to go and check and analyze everything, right? But again, analysis paralysis. How often would you recommend to do an SEO audit?
A lot of it's based on your kind of engagement with the organization. So, you know, if you're doing an audit and then you're effectively stepping away, then that would be different to if it was a client that you're working with consistently. I'd say usually 6 months is a good sort of time window before I even suggest doing any kind of heavy audit again, but that's kind of arbitrary. I mean, if it's a large website with very active content teams, then there's more opportunity to change stuff. If you've got lots of different engineers deploying different things, you've got lots of chances to break stuff, essentially. So there is a degree of the speed of change that you need to measure, and just their overall governance. Like, how good are they at checking things? You know, do you have CMS editors that are hard coding HTML into blocks? If so, then forgetting to close tags or malforming href and all of those elements, you could be breaking stuff all the time, and you need to keep an eye on that. So I'd say 6 months is good because it stops you leaving anything too long. I mean, if someone robots off an entire website, as you mentioned at the start, then you can't wait for an audit to pick up that stuff. So there's a degree of constant monitoring governance that you do need. So whether you use Content King or a tool like Little Warden, it will do the kind of monitoring that keeps the lights on. Is this site still indexable? Has my domain expired, or am I about to miss the renewal of my domain, for example? There's certain issues that cannot wait till an audit. With those that I have an engagement with that lasts, most of mine are 1 year, 2 year plus. I'd say big audit every year, set up the governance processes, and then the more in-depth touch bases as we go around based on priority. So the thing I learned the hard way is there's no point auditing a site if no one's going to fix it in terms of development budget and time. So I've just taken on a new team member on one of the projects I'm leading, and he's gone and audited one of these websites that's full of errors. And he's like, yeah, I found loads of stuff that needs fixing. I said, unfortunately, the priority of that site is very low. Even in the top 20, it doesn't figure in the top 50. And it's kind of like, we can highlight all of that. We can raise the JIRA ticket. We can put all of the evidence of everything that's broken. But by the time an engineering team picks it up, you'll have to re-audit everything all over again because it will all be out of date. And this part how demotivating or demoralizing that may be, but kind of like, no, we just need to focus. Whereas there are 5 sites in North America that if there's a single broken link, there is someone poised to fix it. So I'd say for those ones, we wouldn't necessarily do a full re-audit every 6 months, but we'd keep a very close eye. So I've worked even with Content King with that, or Lumar has Protect, which is effectively the same, or there are more tools that are emergent. I think OnCrawl's got its own version coming soon, and I suspect a lot of the other ones are. But you kind of portion the effort based on the output, which is a fancy way of saying it depends, which I'm really trying not to do, but it is that. I think the other thing I have done in terms of audits and how deep I audit or how frequently is, if I'm working and my stakeholders are content management, I'll audit things that I know that they can fix. And that takes a little bit of time and institutional knowledge, i.e. what's their CMS, what do they have the power to achieve versus what is an engineering task. But I get to the point where we're only auditing issues that they can do. So optimizations in heading structures, titles, certain link blocks that we know that they can edit versus ones they can't. And that kind of auditing is quicker. It doesn't capture everything, but I know that I'm sending the recommendations to the team that can fix it with the lowest overhead, which again just focuses the efforts. And I very much would like a perfect website. I think there's a kind of a condition in SEO where you want that 100 out of 100 or that green, but I've done this long enough to know that perfect does not equal good return on investment. And also I've worked with enough 16-page WordPress websites that are perfect that don't rank for anything. So there's kind of this sort of balancing act around the technical, that technical perfection does not equal success. Which as a technical SEO, that's sad.
Yeah, I have to say something also. We need to differentiate what you mentioned before. Indeed, like one thing is proactive monitoring in case for some reason at some point the team releases something that undo some of your recommendations or configurations, or block the whole website through the robots.txt, or again change the canonical tag because of a bug or something like that. And so you need to keep an eye open on that. I will say that every time that there is a release, you should keep an eye open to see what they release, even if there's no SEO activity or tasks within that the release, just to see if something is broken or breaks when it's released. And then another thing is a full audit. You do an audit when you actually will develop an action plan or recommendations, or to validate that whatever you recommended 6 months ago again, or 4 months ago, is already mostly done, and you want to set new recommendations. So again, it's what drives a little bit your SEO action plan and strategy at the end of the day, based on the opportunities that you find and issues that you find. Another question here, Chris, regarding auditing websites with more than 1 million URLs, big websites. What is the approach that you take in order to prioritize without having to crawl it all? Because I don't know if this is something that we have mentioned before when we did the technical SEO session before. When you have more than 1 million URLs, for example, the goal shouldn't be to crawl it all, but to crawl what matters based on the different types of pages, templates, areas, etc. Right? What is the approach that you take here?
I think there's there's two ways that I'd segment the site. I think firstly, yeah, by template, as you've said. So e-commerce site, my product page, my category page, my blog content area, for example. Or if it's a service-based site, it'd be a knowledge base versus a landing page versus a detail page. And I would kind of break those up into the template types that are indicative of the most. So again, if it's an e-commerce website and it's large, there's a good chance that the vast majority of pages are product detail pages, PDPs. So, okay, if I look at the PDP and I can identify structural issues in that page, then I can fix a large amount of those issues in one. Same with product listings pages. Again, if there's a fundamental issue in the heading structure or the product grid's not loading without JavaScript, then I know that those issues will kind of be relevant for a large majority of the site. The other thing I would also do, though, however, if I do want a really detailed picture, I'd segment to certain site sections. So maybe I'd pick a certain parent category or even a child category that's really important, and I'd just run the crawl through that. So I'd limit the crawl to that directory. So I wouldn't necessarily go, I'm going to limit to these template types, but I would look deep in there. Now, whilst segmenting a large site into small chunks is good for spotting those sort of template level challenges, the one thing that it can't do is if you're in the audit software, you're using like internal link scores, number of inbound internal linking, looking at health of those kind of metrics. That's the one place that it does miss a little bit. So that's more of just an FYI. If you are doing an indicative view of a website or you're using a list crawl to sample and spot issues, then you do miss some portions of detail. And it's not necessarily that there's an easy way to work around that, because simply big sites a bit. I mean, I work with teams that work with very large websites, some of the biggest, and no one has a solution to that problem. So in and of itself, that shouldn't have you too downbeat. What I would say, though, is your auditing platform or software of choice, if it tops out at 500,000 pages, if you've got the 500,000 pages that matter to you, then that's fine. The other way to flip it is go into Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics or whatever your analytics package is, sort by most traffic driving or revenue driving organic pages, and audit those as list view. Because at least from a stakeholder point of view, you can say, well, I've looked at your top 60% of revenue driving pages, or actually more often than not, your top 90%, because most websites drive the vast majority of revenue from a smallish amount of pages, even if they're large e-com. So that's another way to kind of frame that, but keep it small and just segment it into chunks if you're struggling. I think the overall picture is your recommendations will still come down to that same format. Might be a massive website, but I still want to present a list of 5 to 10 a focused amount of issues that can be worked through, which will be true.
What are the most common issues or pitfalls that you see people doing when developing audits? I think that I addressed quite a few. So for example, the ones that I see most of the time, see people thinking that they should follow checklists, and in terms of priorities, the ones that are shared out there, and just share a big checklist in Google Sheets with the client, and the client will know what to do. No, when you need to develop solutions or hypotheses or actions, like you need to do this and this because this is important, and explaining the why. Well, another pitfall is to not explain the why it is important and why it's critical in your context, not providing examples and being too broad. Oh, fix the links to error pages. Yeah, but from where are these links coming? Where are they going, right? So attach in a Google Sheets all of these URLs that you have found, the source of them too, not only the ones that are affected, but where they are being linked to, so they can to facilitate the activity of the developers without messing in their own let's say how to do it, because at the end of the day, this is what they dislike because it's their work, right? So I would say that these are the major, let's say, usual, let's say, not don'ts that I see. Also, when the development team says, or the content team, whatever team, they say that they have actually fixed something, you don't believe, you go and double check, and you take screenshots every single time. You always document with screenshots whenever you recommend anything, even if it is when an initial recommendation or follow-up or validation, you always double check. You never assume that is true. You always screenshot and document and show, because I have had many situations like, oh, this never happened. It was never like that. No, you have proof, right? Also, when crawling, I always think it is advisable to enable the option to save, especially with rebranding or structural changes, to save a copy of the website, of the raw and render HTML too. What else, Chris? What else will you say that are some of those issues, don'ts that you see people do?
Yeah. I mean, there's some good ones. I've been caught out by the amount of times I've seen an issue, not screenshot it, and then felt I was going mad because I couldn't recreate it later. So that will save you a lot of time. I think the other one that most people fall into, and I'm working on the product side of SEO for a team, and I have external agencies and audits coming into me at the moment, which is a great learning exercise. Incidentally, I won't name names, but I've learned some great ways of not to do it just by watching them come in. But the real key one there is, and it's a prioritization problem, is if every issue is either critical or high priority, then none of them are going to be seen as critical or high, because just by virtue of something has to be more important than something else. And what might be really high priority for an SEO is not high priority for an engineering team that's maintaining an e-commerce website or any large website. So when we say this issue is critical, most people would assume that a critical issue means like the server's on fire, or you can't take card payments, or the whole website's inaccessible. Not, I've got 2 heading 1s on my PLP template. And that sounds a bit extreme, but I've seen people say, oh, there's an external link in the footer to another domain. It's like, that's not even a low priority. That's just a FYI. And it's that prioritization comes with time. But I think there's a degree of situational sort of understanding, or I guess common sense to put it the other ways. Is it really a critical issue? If we do not fix it, can we demonstrate the revenue that we're losing based on that? And that's the biggest issue. And I work and train SEOs in agencies. I've managed teams, I've built teams. And that's the biggest challenge. And actually what separates those people ready to, grow as an SEO and kind of move more into senior and account direction is just understanding that business impact. And it's not always, again, this is coming back to what you said right at the start later, is it's not always what Screaming Frog or Lumar or whatever tells you it is. It's that this page is missing, but is that fundamentally a problem? Look at the analytics data. What's the revenue value? If this page was to be lost tomorrow and wasn't brought back for a year, what would that cost the business? And then it's kind of attaching that commercial data to it. That does mean that some fixes and changes, like I need schema on this page. I don't have organizational schema. I know it's good. And they say, okay, well, demonstrate me the revenue it will generate. Demonstrating the revenue of schema is a challenge. If anyone else learns how to do it, please let me know, because it can be difficult. But that's how you move engineering teams, because they are pricing their time accordingly. And if you get them to fix a load of stuff that you can't then demonstrate the value, and then 6 months later you reorder it and you go back to them with another list, they won't pay attention to it. So they're my kind of 2 key ones: is only say it's buildings burning down if it really is, and then secondly, attaching your recommendations to estimate revenue value in a way you can demonstrate that if every SEO did that, far more SEO would get done.
100%. So in fact, I have to mention a couple of things, right? It was a few months ago that I did this SEO FOMO survey regarding the auditing state of things. And unfortunately, too many audits didn't achieve any results based on the answers that I got. And then didn't achieve any results, were not implemented. So of course, if they are not implemented, they don't achieve results. But also I could see that there were more that didn't achieve results, even if they were implemented. So again, it shows the importance of tying whatever we recommend and highlight and establish an action based on a particular goal that we want to achieve. There is a question actually about that, about what are most of the overlooked metrics that we'll miss while auditing a site, and what are the vanity metrics that we should stop chasing. I will say you should stop chasing this overall metric of saying like 100% optimize, whatever 100% optimize of any tool. Like, no, if it is 100% optimized based on your goals, business goals, SEO goals, the metrics that actually matter to the decision makers, and the contract of your work will be renewed or not, and what would impact the ROI of the website. If it doesn't impact the ROI, I don't care if it had a 404. If there are no, is this page, is what pretty much Chris mentioned before, is this page going to be missed by any user? Is key in the customer conversion process is particularly important in the scope of the process. If not, then I'm sorry that it's showing a 404, but it is not me who are going to prioritize to fix it. If that means that I won't do something else that we actually have an impact. So again, it's everything a trade-off, right? Because whenever, this is the thing, whenever you decide to put an action on something, you're leaving something else out, right? So you better make sure that whatever you recommend to do whenever you do something is something that will actually move the needle, help you to advance to achieve a goal. And this also has to do with another question here. If you do an SEO audit and then the business apply improvements according to that, when do you recommend to audit again? Do you include the same metrics or KPIs? Well, when that is a great process and position to be at. You start the SEO process, establish actions and recommendations based on what you found initially very bad, everything, let's say, they improve. 6 months after they have achieved the goals, or a year after they have achieved the goals, 80% of what you recommended was already implemented. You audit again. You identify what else is to be done. Very likely you already fixed a lot of the base, technical, contents improvement, then you need to start building, which is how you actually achieve much more. Remember that I shared with you already that pyramid, right? You start fixing and optimizing what already exists, then you start building new pages, new queries. So no, but you will need to audit, but then you will also potentially do more benchmark to identify opportunities of what your competitors are doing, connect more with the search behavior of the user to see what you're not yet grabbing, and you can to create more. So no, you evolve, your goals evolve, your recommendations evolve accordingly. So, and I believe that, well, this is the normal scenario of an SEO process. I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to add on that, Chris, to take into account when the SEO process evolves and your SEO recommendations need to also evolve accordingly.
I mean, the best SEO audits mean that you don't talk about that issue again because you've moved on to the next one. That's the shortest kind of take on it. Now, that's very idealistic because sometimes you have to repeat yourselves, maybe too much. I would say, I mean, I like to always audit from the same benchmark. So you always start from the same position, and that's where most software helps you from that. So, you know, even if their goals have evolved or they've fixed some elements, it helps you just run a direct comparison of, well, this is the amount of stuff that was broken before. You have arbitrary figure, 20% less broken stuff. We haven't finished the job. We're going to move on to a new area. And that helps kind of demonstrate that progress. The other thing, though, and what I would say is, even if you know they've been fixed, always recheck the old stuff, because what often you do see is, again, I hate the word governance because people use it in organizations and I don't always know how meaningful it is, but you might fix something, but it could then get broken again. And and if you've only been paid to deliver the audit, you haven't necessarily been paid to bring in and reintroduce the new process to ensure that moving forward it's maintained. Things like uploading images with correct file names or optimizing product titles as you go. You know, if you have to do 40,000 of those in one go, that feels expensive and unlikely a good use of your time. If, however, you have a team that gets it right as they're uploading it, and they're not an SEO team, they're just a shared resource, and you just need to train the organization to do something a little bit better each time, you avoid the need to do the big job later on where it feels less profitable. So if you're in the position to, with an audit, is advise where they can fix the big technical things, but also that's your opportunity to point out, well, where are the dysfunctions within this organization, or where are their processes potentially broken. So I've worked with e-commerce businesses before where they've just had absolutely no clue about when stock's going to come in and out. So we at a moment's notice, you'd have a category that's dropped, or 10 categories that was dropped. And when you've produced 100 new pages of content and 30% of them have been dropped because actually that range had been cut and no one had told us, it meant that we had to actually pivot and say, stop, you know, we actually need to speak to the buying department and the merchandisers before we start optimizing these tier of pages, because actually from a process point of view, the SEO team would be working to a goal that the other business teams weren't kind of connected with. And I'm going on a little bit of a tangent. I'm taking one more step back. Is the big SEO issues that you spot, particularly the big IT ones, they point to issues in that organization. So you're not just looking at technical SEO problems, you're looking at the decision-making process in the last 5 years. You're looking at how good is the CTO, how good is all of that. So your immediate job is always fix those issues, but stepping back, how, and if you have a chance to reflect, how have they got themselves into that situation? Who's driven that? Who has stopped the new platform redevelopment for the past 3 years? Who stopped paying for that engineering team? You can't solve that problem overnight, but it's quite interesting to watch that. And in the future, you'll find, actually, to solve this problem, I don't have to fix it right now. I need to work upstream and find the cause and get buy-in higher up first. And as I said, you won't all be doing that from day one. That's I wish I mastered that. I'm still working on it, but you'll start to see these connections and join these dots between, actually, this isn't an SEO problem. This is an organizational governance problem.
That is an amazing and very in-depth answer indeed, because many times we think is the SEO, let's say, output or element or instance is only the let's say one of the many outcomes of the actual issue. That is another one, indeed, and it's not the cause of the problem, indeed. To wrap up a little bit, because we have only a couple of minutes left, very quickly, there's a question here. If a website has a bad technical part, can you move forward with the content part, or is it better to solve the base before implementing content? Try to do things in parallel if possible, especially if content and technical, there should be two different teams, right? And also it depends if the technical misconfiguration actually will make the content to not be indexable at all. Yeah, you better go and prioritize that. But if it is about enhancing the content, structured data, for example, things like that, you don't need to wait for that to be fixed to start already with content, right? So again, it depends, but it depends if the technical configuration is actually hurting the viability at all of the content to be crawlable and indexable in the first place. So based on that and the impact, you will give the proper priority. Then finally, I would like to tackle this because I see that there are a few questions regarding AI that can be tackled with this, right? What guidelines should I follow if I want to automate audits? Don't automate audits. Why would you like to automate audits? I mean, many elements or areas or tasks within the auditing process are already automated. When you crawl, what Screaming Frog does, or any SEO crawlers does. And also, there are many more SEO crawlers like Horseman, for example. They integrate with OpenAI because they automate many of the recommendations for the issues, or they try to support you in the recommendation of the issues. So for example, if they identify that there are titles that are duplicated, they will tell you these are duplicated. You need to come up with unique titles. Here's how we recommend them to be fixed. And they recommend new titles by using ChatGPT, OpenAI integration, right? Horseman, it is called, by the way. You can go and take a look at it. This SEO auditing is excellent. But again, these are recommendations. This is support. You shouldn't try to completely automate your audits, because if you have been paying attention here, what is fundamental here is our know-how, our goals, understanding, connecting every issue and opportunity that we identify with the goals that we need, establishing actions in a way that are easy to understand and connect well with the need of our audience, of our business, and that generate and incentivize change. And sorry, but I believe that any human is much better at that at this point than any bot, right? And that is something that I don't see doable to automate right now. So you better don't try to automate completely audits. If by automating you mean leaving crawls automated, the configurations for that in every SEO crawler for scheduling, and to validate automatically many issues that are particularly important in your scenario, that's great to facilitate your analysis. But please, don't try to automate your recommendations, because that is just the recipe for disaster, right? Any last words to wrap up today's edition, Chris? Thank you again for the opportunity. And I don't know if you have any last tips.
Final background.
SEO auditing.
Final background. I think this is kind of covers the most of it. Prioritization. I'd say most of the time content is the defining factor. Unless you have a massive website, I always tend to start there. And this is coming from a tech SEO. If you can solve the content problems unless your technical ones are massive, or it's a huge website, content will tend to do more. I agree with Leda, do both. But if you only can pick one, which is arbitrary, content still does win. Don't know why the dog behind me is the most distracting background in the world, but that's it from me. But no, that's been really enjoyable, and thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you very much for all your insights. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you have enjoyed our today's edition too. Thank you for the opportunity, and hope to see you in the next edition of Learning SEO.